Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of our Warframe content on YouTube. We are going to be having a little bit of a playthrough with Khora now. Khora is the new frame that was introduced with the Sanctuary Onslaught event as of the 20th of the 4th, 2018. And so what do we think of Khora so far? From the first glance, Khora is a very interesting frame. She doesn't really have any elements that are reflective of any other frame in the game. And what this video is going to do is we're going to go over the basic summary as to what Khora is, how she plays, and what her abilities do. So for the word go, Khora has 4 main abilities as always. The first ability being Whip Claw. This ability is a pretty interesting ability where she summons a whip which lashes onto an enemy. We'll look through these abilities individually as we go. Then she has Ensnare, which is sort of like a weird crowd control that latches onto others. So it goes to a single target and that spreads to others. Then you've got Venere, which is her summonable pet. And then you have Strangledome. Now, her passive... Daisy, just go back there a second. Her passive is the interesting part about this. Her passive is for every pet that is within range, she gains 15% extra armor. And that is a very interesting thing that is going to be shown later in this video. So, let's test out her abilities from the word go. We're going to summon some big mobs to test this out. We've got some level... those were not the ones I wanted to test. We wanted some... I actually set this up earlier. So we're going to use some level 150 bombards, because these are probably the best things to test things out on. So level 150 bombards. And we all know how tough bombards are. So the 1 is a whip that does a small amount of splash damage to enemies within a small radius. Now, we're going to go over build in a moment, but we're just going to get a quick premise for the abilities. So again, the base damage is quite powerful, and this scales well with power. This is where a lot of the damage with Khora will come from if you're looking to do damage with her. It does also scale from your melee weapon. So if you're building your melee weapon efficiently, and you're building it with status effects, for example, these status effects will transfer over to the frames by the looks of it. And if you're, for example, using slash weapon, for example. You then have her 2, which is a sort of crowd control. It's a bit interesting with this one, because it'll latch onto the initial target like so, and then it'll start pulling in other characters around her, the initial target, which is incredibly interesting to watch. And then all the subsequent characters within that range are also crowd controlled. They are also made, I believe they're made inert. They basically won't actually do, it's a hard crowd control. They basically stay within their bindings. The main target is, I believe, doubly affected by this duration. This is the ability that will be most affected by your duration mod, so going for full duration with this build especially is going to be really beneficial. Just going to go back and grab some energy a second. This is also being recorded on my Twitch currently, so if you are interested in any of our Twitch streams, we do stream every single day for about 12 hours or so with Warframe. You are always welcome to come and join us. There'll be a link in the description of the video. So let's have a look at this one more time on a spread out pack of enemies. So we're going to put this in the middle here. I'm going to see how many targets it pulls in. So it pulls them in one at a time, but it crowd controls them at the same time. Now, depending on the application, this could prove to be incredibly useful for certain situations. And I think this is worth having a play around with seeing how range affects this. There is a thought in my mind that this could actually be one of the more powerful crowd controls in the game. The control being is that the duration is only affecting the main target. So the ones who subsequently get pulled in then come out of the crowd control much earlier. This could be quite nice for synergizing with other frames, wherein you could then line it up with another ability from another frame and just have them all blow up, or doing this and then using a Tonk, for example, or an explosive weapon like Lens. So moving on to the 3. The 3 is Summon Kavat. This is your, essentially the Summon Kavat. And this scales with your duration. Your Kavat is then going to run off and start doing its duty. The Kavat does scale with power, but is also able to be modded in of itself. So you're able to deal a significant amount, like this pet is immensely potent, and it has a very high amount of base health. So if you get the share health mod, or the shared health link even, that's going to be incredibly helpful for this. And because Cora will always have usually 2 Kavats on her, or 2 pets at any given time. I believe that counts for being a Kubra as well. You will always have 30% base damage up. We've brought in Evil Shadow Wolf here to test out whether having more than 1 Kavat will up it. It doesn't actually look like it ups it outside of your own pets. So it only scales from your own pets. And it's 15% per pet, so 30% extra armor. This does give the idea with the passive that there is the potential here for being a bit tanky, because it's done by a percentage, meaning if you have a high base armor, 30% extra on top of that does add a quite substantial amount. The number 2 crowd control seems to be quite interesting. It only seems like even when you have... So if there are any that have been affected by the 2, it seems like only the main one who initially got targeted will be affected by the main crowd control. The rest of them will then be only affected by the secondary crowd control. Now moving on, we have Cora's 4, which is a crowd control. And this crowd control is a very interesting one. This is the dance party, so to say. Now, the funny thing about this, any enemy that moves into this crowd control will then be caught up in it, and they become a shiny disco ball. Now, the thing about this crowd control is that it's got quite a... This is with max range currently. The build... I'm going to show my builds at the end of this anyway, but I'm currently using a max range build. Now, even with max range, this is not a ginormous area. So I think if you're looking at specific uses for this crowd control, you're looking at a very defense mode type use here. So imagine the closest thing I can relate this to is Vauban's Bastille. Vauban's Bastille has a very similar effect to this, where enemies that walk within this area will then be affected by this. Enemies that are within a certain radius also get pulled in. I believe it's a small radius outside of that, so let's just test it out of here. And you can put multiple up at any given time as well. So, in theory, you could put this out multiple times over the map. Like so. And you sort of section off a good area. And the actual duration of this thing is not immensely potent with... It doesn't actually scale massively well with duration. So, you're only going to get maybe 45 seconds duration out of this. The amount of targets it will then latch onto is not actually determined. I believe it's infinite, but... that could be up for debate. That would need further testing. We're more looking at the base idea here. So this in of itself is probably worth playing Cora. Yo, Kai Smet, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream. So, I mean, 45 seconds for being within Warframe, it's a lot. It is a lot. One of the people in the chat did mention that. But... imagine, we're looking at sort of a crowd control that is pretty much as solid as a Rhino or a, this is so funny. It's kind of, it's as solid as using a Rhino or a Vauban Bastille. It has that effectiveness of being able to solidly remove an enemy from combat. And I believe it's indefinite even if you shoot the enemy. Like, no matter how much you shoot this enemy, they're not going to end up falling down and getting back up anytime soon. And it will last for as long as the duration. However many enemies it affects, I believe it's related to how big the actual shell is. And if you then go for a minimal range build, you obviously then get that potency that you can lock down a small area, much akin to how a Limbo would. But whether that would be relevant or not would be up to the players. I think Cora is one of those frames that is going to need a lot of play testing to get the most out of her. And whether we then upload a video later down the line, if you guys want to see a more in-depth look with play testing Cora to find how the finesse of her works, please leave a comment down in the description of this video below, and we'll take a look at we'll take a much more in-depth look. Okay, so something that I didn't quite cover when I went through the Venari initially is that the Venari has 3 different stances. Resummoning the Venari changes the stance of the Venari. You have the protection Venari, the healing Venari, and the offensive Venari. And depending on the pose you choose, the tail changes. It's kind of funky to watch. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're using the Venari. It's quite interesting. It's very dynamic in that way that plays. So, you know, there's even more dynamics there that you have the potential to heal as well as be very defensive, which is very interesting. That could even work more with the power build as well. Alright, so we have one last thing we're going to test with the 4. So we've summoned another 20 little chargers, and we're going to test we're going to test to see how many enemies this Korra's 4 will actually affect. So let's let them all come to us. Hello, little friends. Come to me, please. Come to me. Hello. All right, let's try this. So that pretty much got all 20 of them. And looking at the way this works, every enemy is being picked up at an intersection. So the amount of crowd control you get, it feels like it's based on how many intersecting points there are. So whether there's a set amount in regards to the build is going to be interesting to find out. But this does show that this crowd control is pretty damn potent. Pretty goddamn potent. So
you're hanging people.
Oh, you know it, baby. Hanging around, baby. Just being ready to be a disco ball.
I think if there's not enough like points or intersections, and I think it's geodesic. I think it's called.
Yeah.
That's
well, something I've noticed as well. The actual damage this thing does isn't actually that bad either. Like if you were to go for a hybrid power range build, you could in theory get some potential damage, good damage out of this for low levels. As for the builds behind Korra, I believe most of her builds are going to revolve around range and duration if you want to get the most out of her. We are going to look at a power build as well, but I believe the most potency from her will come from her crowd control from her 2 and her longevity of her pet with her 3, and also the duration of her crowd control from her 4. Now, whether you would like to get some power out of her as well, there is that question, does going for full power really make her worthwhile? Because going power would then affect I believe the link between your pet and the damage it would then do, but we're going to test that as well. So bear with me a moment, we're going to go test it out. Okay, so we are back with a very rushed strength mod. Please ignore the aura. I literally got this frame about 5 minutes after it came out and rushed to do a video on it. So again, this video is not to be taken too seriously. This is literally just an overview of the builds and the way they're played. So this is a pure power strength build. We're going to be looking at the potency of her 1 and how much this strength then affects the Kubrow, or the Kavat even. So with all this extra strength, and a very decently modded weapon, I think it's probably worth taking the bombards away now just to get the efficiency of this. Let's try and get... let's get something slightly squishier. We'll go for a charger just because it's a bit better. We'll still keep them level 150 just to test relevancy, and we'll sort of we'll scale them down a little bit until it becomes a bit relevant. Because the thing about power strength abilities is that they do scale very badly at certain points, and unless it's down to the weapon, we're gonna have to see. So level 150 charger, no armor. So against the level 150, you're doing a significant amount of damage, and bearing in mind, this is the build that I have on my melee weapon. I think I should have shown you that, really. So the ability that I have, the mods that I have on my melee weapon are specifically status-based at the moment, but scaling with this is quite nice. I feel like, if I just show you the build I have with my Galatine in a second. Again, the build I have with my Galatine was literally to go base damage and nothing more. And again, this is not to be efficient. This is literally just to prove a point. So slash damage with base elemental type. And it shows to be incredibly potent. Like, there is a lot of damage potential here. And if we aim at the very middle target here, so there is a lot of potential damage here. I think if this scales well with crit, you could have the potential of having a lot of damage here. The actual efficiency, modding for then some efficiency with Prime Flow, for example, you get some insane damage from this. I think maybe because I've modded for status types, there's a lot of the resistances on the bombards were maybe a bit too high to make this effective. So in short, when we look at Korra, we have found a frame that is very unique in its playstyle. It has a lot of potential to be very interesting in its playstyle. I think there's a lot of depth that can be looked into this. If you want to see us go a bit more in depth with how Korra plays, the finesse of her builds and whatnot, then please leave a comment in the description to let me know. Let me know what you think of Korra. Do you think she's good? Do you think she's useful? Do you think she's going to have much team synergy? And if you want to see more of these kind of Warframe videos, let me know as well. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. Have a great day and stay dapper, my dudes. Ta-ra.